I just want to thank you guys so much for coming to this webinar today. Because you guys are here today, you're helping to support Prevention Plus, and you're helping to support the workers who make all of this stuff possible for us. And, you know, in these really uncertain times, I just really, from the bottom of my heart, want to thank you guys for coming to this presentation. So my name is Brooke Romero. I was really little, maybe like 6 or 7. I remember cooking my own meals, and I would cook like spaghetti, and I would just take like, you know, box noodles and like heat up sauce from the can kind of thing. I loved food so much that a lot of times when I was little, I would like pretend that I was on a cooking show, you know? And so I would be like, all right, and today we have artisan crafted pasta fresh from the box. And I'm using a cured Parmesan cheese from Walmart, you know. But I just really loved food. And so as I got older, I grew up kind of chunky. And so because I was a little bit bigger than the other kids I went to school with, I got teased a lot. So what happened was that kind of led me to have this relationship with food where anytime I was sad, anytime I was bored or lonely, instead of dealing with my emotions, I would find myself reaching for food. So what ended up happening was I developed this really unhealthy relationship with food, and I kept gaining weight and gaining weight until by the time I graduated high school, I was over 200 pounds. And even though I was cooking a lot of my meals at home, I didn't understand that food that I was eating was really unhealthy food, even though it was food that I was cooking at home. And of course, you know, also I was eating out kind of thing. And so the more I started to study food, the more I started to learn about nutrition and how different foods affect my body, I started to really understand that not only is it important to eat foods that are nutritious and healthy for you, it's also really important to have a good relationship with food. But it's really interesting because in our society, you know, there are so many different options when it comes to food. And one thing that's really important to focus on when we're focusing on food is that it's not about weight, it's about health. And so as I started to get older and as I started to lose weight, a lot of the focus started to be losing weight. And then I realized that it's not about losing weight. It's not about, you know, having the perfect body. It's about taking care of the body that I have. And like I said, there are so many different options nowadays. And when you go to the grocery store, it can be really confusing. You can go to the grocery store and you can be surrounded by fruits and vegetables and produce, and then go just an aisle over and you're surrounded by like family-sized bags of chips and frozen meals. Not only that, then it's like, you know, this frozen meal says healthy choice on it. Is it any healthier than that frozen burrito? So that can be really confusing. And not only that, the science behind nutrition can be really confusing. When you look at like magazines and stuff, more you start to look at nutrition information, there's a lot of conflicting information out there. So one website will be like, you know, don't eat carbs, and one website is like, a high carb diet is the way to go. And then you see stuff that's like very anti-fat and stuff that's very pro-fat. There's all of this conflicting information. Now, one of the reasons why there's so much conflicting information out there is because of the scientific studies that are done. Now, these big food corporations like PepsiCo and Frito-Lay and all of these big companies have so much money that what they can do is they can actually pay to have scientific studies done. And so they'll pay scientists to do these studies and kind of have their own outcome. So let me ask you guys this. Has everybody heard the phrase, breakfast is the most important meal of the day? Has everyone heard that phrase before? I can type in the chat section. I like a lot of interaction if you guys can't tell. Let's see, any chats coming through? A couple of you guys? So everyone's heard that phrase, right? Like breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Where that phrase came from, that phrase came from a 19th century study that showed that people who eat breakfast tend to have a lower body weight. They tend to have an easier time focusing during the day. Actually, where that study came from was it was a study that was funded by Kellogg, who, makes breakfast cereal. So instead of that being scientific research, it actually ends up being more of a advertisement for breakfast than anything else. So it can be really, really difficult when we start to look at, food studies and things like that. So when I read studies, I always make sure that I'm looking at where the information is coming from, where the funding is coming from, and making sure that that information is consistent with information that has been proven again and again over time. Now, that doesn't necessarily make the science of it any less confusing, though. It's still very confusing. And one thing that I think ends up being really confusing is figuring out what is good to eat and what maybe we shouldn't eat. So I'm going to put a couple polls up on the screen. I just want to find out kind of where you guys are, what kind of information you've heard and stuff. So I'm going to put some words on the screen. I want you guys to vote on whether you think that these food terms are good for you, bad for you, or whether they're neutral, so whether they're not good or bad. So I'm going to start the first poll. And the first one is calories. Go ahead and vote. Calories, good, bad, or neutral? And I'll wait for a few votes to come in. Okay, so we're getting a couple people voting. I'll give it maybe 6 more seconds. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and display the results. 16% of you guys said good, 16% of you guys said bad, and then 66% of you guys said neutral. I'm not sure if the results are displaying or not. So here's the second one. Second one is fat. So fat. Okay, and this one will definitely display at the end. So fat, good, bad, or neutral? Okay, some of you guys are voting. That's great. Okay, I'm going to give it about 3 more seconds. All right, and with this one, 14% of you guys said good, 0% of you guys said bad, and 85% said neutral. Let's see, we're going to do 2 more here. Next one is one of my favorites, pizza. So pizza, good, bad, or neutral? I'm going to give it a few more seconds here, let you guys vote. Okay, a lot of votes are coming in. I love that. So 14% of you guys said good, 28% said bad, and 57% said neutral, right? And last one that we're going to do is fruit. Fruit. So good, bad, or neutral? All right, and we'll give that about 5 more seconds. All right, and 71% of you guys said good, and 28% of you guys said neutral. No one said bad. The thing about that, you guys, because there were some really mixed reactions from all of those, except fruit, which I guess no one says bad. But there was really mixed reactions from all of those. And the thing about that is there are no good foods or bad foods. Every single one of those foods is neutral. The reason for that is even though some foods are more nutritious and some foods are less nutritious, all of those foods contain things that your body needs. So all of those foods, pizza, ice cream, fruit, vegetables, all of those foods contain things like salt, minerals, calories, which your body really needs, that your body runs on and uses to keep moving and keep processing things. All of those contain things that your body needs. Let me give you guys an example. Let's say that I went out today and I went to McDonald's and I had like a big, huge cheeseburger and some French fries and a milkshake, right? And then when I come home, I see that my husband has also got a Little Caesars pizza. Well, if you were to classify just the pizza in that situation, because I had already eaten so much fast food that day, and because that pizza really isn't going to provide me with much more nutrient, you might consider that pizza to be a bad food. You might consider all of that food to be bad foods. Let me give you guys another scenario. Let's say that you're stranded in the desert, right? And you've been out there for weeks, and you haven't had water, and you haven't had food, and then you come up on a situation like this, where you can go 125 miles that way to a Whole Foods market where you're going to have, pineapple and vegetables and all these different fresh foods, or you can go half a mile to a Krispy Kreme and Little Caesars. Well, obviously nobody is going to go 125 miles to the Whole Foods market, because even though you're going to get less nutrition from that pizza and donut, you're still going to get things that your body needs. You're still going to get calcium from the cheese on that pizza. You're still going to get protein. You're still going to get carbs that your body needs to keep your brain functioning. And you're still going to get, sugars, which will be a quick source of energy. Also really important, those foods are still going to contain water. And so every single food that's out there, we can't classify it as good food or bad food. What we should be classifying it as is foods that are more nutritious for us, foods that we should eat more often, and foods that we should enjoy less often or as a treat. So when it comes to calories, what are calories? Is a calorie from one food the same as a calorie from another food if they're not good or bad foods? Now, what a calorie is a calorie is essentially the amount of energy needed to raise 1 gram of water to 1 degree Celsius. So basically all a calorie is its energy. It's the energy that our body uses to keep our heart pumping, to keep our brain functioning, to keep us moving around. And it's something that your body really needs. But while a calorie is a calorie regardless of where it's coming from, what comes along with those calories is what can make it really different. So let's compare two foods. Let's say that you're going to either have 300 calories from something like pizza or 300 calories from something like salmon and broccoli. Now, if you were to eat that pizza, what that pizza is composed of is the bread is, a lot of carbs and a lot of refined carbs. So you're not getting a lot of the fiber and stuff that would come with like whole grains. You're getting a lot of sugar in that sauce. You're getting a lot of dairy products from the cheese. So you are going to get some calcium from that, but it's also going to be very greasy. And then you're going to get a lot of grease from the pepperoni. Now, if you take a look at this chart, it shows you kind of how different foods fill up your stomach. So what that pizza is going to be composed of is it's mainly oil, the cheese and the meat. It's kind of the lower end of those food groups. So your body's going to process it really, really quickly. All of that food is going to go through you really quickly. It's not going to keep you full for a long time. And especially because from 300 calories from pizza, you're really only going to get about 1 slice, maybe 1.5 slices. And I don't know about you guys, but I have never been full off of just 1 slice of pizza. Now, if you were to choose the salmon and the broccoli, because it's meat and veggies, you're going to get a lot of really good fats from that fish. You're going to get a lot of omega-3s. The vegetables are going to come with a lot of fiber that's going to keep you really full, and it's going to keep you full for a long time, and it's going to provide your body with a lot of nutrients that your body needs. Now, your body is also going to process it a lot slower because it has so much fiber and things like that in it. So it's going to keep you full for a long time. You're definitely going to feel a lot more satisfied from 300 calories from salmon and broccoli than you would from 300 calories of pizza. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't eat the pizza, right? because sometimes, not only is it important to eat things that are healthy for your body, it's important to eat things that are healthy for your mental health as well. But those foods are going to act very differently inside of your body. Now, like I said, there are no good foods or bad foods. There is one food group that we should be really, really aware of how much we're eating, and that is sugar. Now, with foods like pizza, with things like sugar, the problem is when those treat foods become the norm. I have definitely experienced this in my life because I used to really love sugar and I used to really love fast food. I had this habit where the foods that I would eat the same kind of foods again and again. What I found was they weren't treats anymore. They ended up becoming the foods that I would eat every day. And then what I found was these foods that I was eating every day, I would slowly start to eat more and more and more of them. I used to work at a cafe, and I would have the closing shift, so I would be off around midnight. And at midnight, my husband and I, when we were dating, we would go out to eat dinner. So about twice a week, we would go to Sonic Drive-In because they had this boneless wings deal, and I love boneless wings. Like even still today, boneless wings are one of my favorite foods. And so we would go. It was buy one get one free boneless wings, and so they would come in sets of 6. So I would get 6, he would get 6, and then one night, after having done this for a couple weeks, like twice a week for few weeks, we decided, you know what, we're really hungry tonight. Like tonight, we're gonna get 12 wings each, just as like a little treat. So we get 12 wings each, and it's so much, and we're like, oh, I can't believe we ate that much food, And then the next time we go back to 6, then a couple times after that, like, you know what, I think we want 12 again. And then what happened was eating 12 wings became the norm. And every time we went to Sonic, we were eating 12 wings each. Then, this is where the story gets kind of embarrassing. There was one time where they misunderstood our order, and instead of giving us 12 wings each, they accidentally gave us 24 wings each. So we had a total of 48 boneless wings. And looking at it, we're like, oh, we can't eat this much, and then we did. And then it was this awful thing where suddenly after that, every time we went to Sonic, I was secretly hoping that they would misunderstand our order again so that I could eat 24 boneless wings, which is way too much food. That's way more food than anybody should be eating. And what we see, especially here in America, is these foods that are meant to be treat foods like cake and ice cream and chips and burgers and things like that slowly start to become the norm. They slowly start to become the food that we're eating every single day. When you look at statistics of how much fast food Americans eat, as you can see over time, it really, really increases. That can become a problem because it keeps our body from allowing us to know what foods we're really craving and what foods we just want because they're a treat. Now, like I said, one food group that you should be really aware of is sugar. In American foods, in packaged foods that you would find in the grocery store, about 85% of packaged foods contain some kind of added sugar. I think all of us, if we stopped and looked at the foods that we're eating, would be really surprised at the amount of sugar that we're eating. Over history, the amount of sugar that we used to get through, or that the average American would get through in an entire year about 100 years ago, that's the amount of sugar that we're getting through in about a month. Whereas before it would have been over the course of an entire year. So especially Americans, but people all across the world are eating sugar at an alarming rate. Now, sugar is a really interesting thing because it's in a lot of different foods, but it's really interesting because I want to have you guys type something in the chat, because when you look at the FDA recommendations for like calories or the FDA recommendations for salt, there's a set amount that we're supposed to be eating that the government recommends for us. I want you guys to type in the comment section How many grams of sugar a day do you think your body actually needs? What is our body's actual requirement for sugar? So go ahead and type if you think you know. We'll see if any chats come through. Okay, no chats are coming through. Okay, if you guys don't want to guess, or maybe you can't type that fast, that's okay. So when you look at the FDA recommendations for calories, they recommend about 2,000 calories for women and about 2,500 calories for men. When you look at the FDA recommendations for salt, what it's saying is try to eat about this much salt every day. When you look at the FDA recommendations for sugar, your body actually has no requirement for sugar. Your body requires 0 grams of sugar a day. So when you look at the FDA recommendation for sugar, it's not saying try to eat this much sugar a day. What it's actually saying is if you're going to have sugar, try to limit it to this much every day. Now, that can be really confusing because those are pretty different ideas. Now, our brain does run on things like glucose. Your body has no requirement for sugar. Now, if we were to look at this chart, you can see that the annual consumption of sugar throughout history has really increased, and that's due to the processing of foods. And all of these companies add a lot of sugar to their foods. So if you look at things like even chips have sugar in them, salad dressings, ketchup, foods that you wouldn't expect to be, you wouldn't consider them sweet foods, they still have sugar in them. Now, let's look at something like an apple versus a donut. If you were going to go out and have a donut, that donut is going to have about 11 grams of sugar. If you were to have an apple, the apple is going to have about 17 grams of sugar. Now, if you were to look at just those two numbers, right? If you were saying, I'm not focusing on anything else, I'm just going to focus on sugar, which one of those two would be healthier? Well, donut, right? The donut has less sugar in it. Logic dictates that the apple is healthier for us. Now, the reason is because those two contain very different kinds of sugar. Now, the sugar in apples is going to be unrefined sugar. It's going to be mostly glucose molecules, and it's going to come with a lot of fiber. Your body's going to break it down really, really slowly. It's going to keep you very full. It's going to keep you really satisfied. And your body knows how to process that kind of sugar. If you were to look at the sugar that's in donuts, it's going to be mostly refined sugar, which is glucose mixed with fructose, and your body processes that a lot more quickly. So your body's going to process it really quickly. Not only that, but there's not going to be any fiber to help slow down that process. It's going to have a lot of carbs, which is also going to increase that process. And you're going to have this huge blood sugar spike. You might get this little burst of energy. More than likely, after you eat that donut, after about 30 minutes or so, you're going to find yourself reaching for some more food that has sugar, some more, easy to process foods. And that's because of the way that sugar is processed differently between things like fruit and things like a donut. So if we were to look at these two foods in nature, back when we were hunter-gatherers, if we were to find an apple, the reason why a lot of foods are sweet is because most foods that are sweet tend to not be poisonous. So when our ancestors were eating apples or bananas or fruits like that, what it was telling our brain is this food is probably going to be safe to eat. And another thing that happened was it would give our body a lot of energy, which was really, really important to us when we were hunter-gatherers. Now, our brains are hardwired to love sugar. I'm not sure if you guys heard about a study that came out that said that sugar is 9 times as addictive as cocaine. But when I heard that, I thought, that's crazy, because you see people doing all these crazy things to get cocaine, and you don't see people, robbing their families and stuff to get a candy bar. Where that study came from, what they did with that study was they took these little white mice, and they and they had them in a cage with lots of food, lots of water. They made sure these mice were happy and well fed. And then they gave them these 2 switches. And one switch, when they would push it, it would give them cocaine. And one switch, when they would push it, it would give them a sugar water mixture. Now, they made sure that the mice had tried both. And then 8 times a day, they would take these mice, put them in this cage with these 2 options, and almost every single time the mice chose sugar. So the scientists thought, okay, that's interesting. Let's see if we can take it a little bit further. So then they took mice that were only addicted to the cocaine. And they did the same kind of thing where these mice were addicted to cocaine, but they were in this cage with food and water and all this stuff. And then they put them into a cage with the cocaine switch and the sugar switch 8 times a day. And almost every single mouse got themselves off of cocaine and got addicted to sugar. So then, this is where the study gets really crazy. Then what they did was they lowered the amount of cocaine that the mice would get. Sorry, they upped the amount of cocaine, they lowered the amount of sugar that the mice would get, and they actually added a delay in the sugar. So the mice, if they chose the cocaine, would get this huge rush of cocaine right away. If they chose the sugar, they would get less sugar, and they would have to wait a minute for it. And still, almost every single mouse chose the sugar over the cocaine. So what does that mean for us? What it means for us is that even though sugar is really normalized in our society, it is still a very addictive substance that we need to be aware of how much we're eating. Like I said, the food companies know this. They know that these foods are addictive to us. Companies like PepsiCo and Frito-Lay spend so much money every year to make sure that their foods are optimum delicious. They have this thing that they call the bliss point. They make sure that their foods are just salty enough, just sweet enough, just crispy enough, the perfect texture, the perfect flavor to be maximum addictive to us. They're designing these foods to keep us addictive, to keep us coming back again and again and again. So it's really important to be aware of how much you're eating. Especially because with these foods, like I said, going from being treats to, sorry, I'm going to go back one. Going from being treats to becoming the norm, it's really easy for us to eat these foods again and again and again. Now, I know that I had a really bad problem with sugar, and one of the reasons why sugar is so addictive is because when you eat sugar, that sugar goes into your system, it hits your brain, and it releases a chemical called dopamine. Now, a lot of you, I'm sure, have heard of dopamine before. It's kind of the pleasure chemical in our brain. What a lot of people think that dopamine does is they think that dopamine says, I like doing this, which isn't entirely true. What dopamine actually says is it says, do this again in the future. Now, those are really similar concepts, but they come into play a little bit differently. Let me give you guys an example of how our human motivation works. Because it's not the thing itself that is motivating, it's almost the anticipation before it. Dopamine is responsible for keeping us looking for that thing again and again and again, which when we were hunter-gatherers, kept us, searching, kept us trying to better our society. So it was really important to us. Nowadays, it kind of works against us. Let me give you guys an example. Does everybody remember opening birthday presents when you were a kid? Take yourself back there, like your 8th birthday party or, whatever birthday it was. You would see that mountain of presents that all your friends had brought. You were so excited to see what was in those presents, and you felt like you couldn't contain yourself because you needed to know what was in those presents. And I don't know if you guys remember or not, but at least for me, I would open those presents, I would see what was in it, And it was almost like there was this huge drop off in excitement. Then when you see what's in it, you're kind of like, oh, okay. You're less excited, even if it was something you really, really wanted. Now, the reason for that is because, like I said, dopamine isn't responsible for making us feel good. It's responsible for making us want more. And since sugar releases so much dopamine into our brains, it's responsible for making us want more and more and more sugar. And the food industries know this. So they pack their foods with sugar to keep us coming back again and again and again. So does this mean that we're all terrible people because we can't say no to a box of cookies? Of course not. These foods are designed to keep us from being able to tell what we really want or what we don't. So this is where we start to get into diets versus lifestyles. Because if you Google, what's the best diet to do, there are so many different options. I mean, even the ones that I put up here on the screen aren't even all the ones that are out there. And then there's conflicting ones like high carb, low fat versus low carb, high fat kind of thing. All of these diets, one thing that I want to make really clear to you guys is that these diets will work. If you want to do a diet, it will work. If you want to sustain a lifestyle, then these kind of like very restrictive diets might not necessarily be the best thing. When I was starting my journey to a healthier lifestyle, I thought about all that stuff. I thought about keto. I thought about going vegan. I thought about, intermittent fasting, all of those different things. You really have to find what works for you. So my two tips for maintaining a healthy lifestyle is number one, find what works for you. If you're somebody who, loves steak and chicken and, things like that, then you can't possibly imagine that you're going to go vegan. It's just not going to work. If you're somebody who loves fruits and veggies and whole grains and doesn't really like cheese or meat so much, then you can't possibly go keto. It just doesn't work. So what you have to do is you have to find what works for you. Number two is to be consistent. Note that I said consistent, not perfect. It's really important that you be consistent with your actions. And what I mean by that is, if you're going to go keto, then, keto is very strict on like, you can't have this food, you can't have that food, you can't have this food kind of thing. You have to make sure that that's going to be something that you could stick to for a long time. So for me, I don't really like meat that much. I don't really like cheese that much, but I really love fruits and veggies. So like I said, obviously I couldn't maintain a ketogenic lifestyle. I could maintain a lifestyle where I am vegetarian a lot of the time, and every now and then I'll have fish or chicken or something like that. So it's really tricky when we start to put ourselves into these like boxes and confinements of this is what I eat, this is what I don't eat. It's important to be consistent with the things that you're eating. And again, what I mean by that is finding foods that are more nutritious that we eat most of the time, and foods that are maybe less nutritious or that we enjoy as a treat, we can enjoy every now and then. Now, it's really important to allow yourself to listen to your body. One thing that I think is really amazing is it's called intuitive eating. And what intuitive eating is it's really listening to your body. It can be really tricky because before I started my journey to a healthier lifestyle, I thought about intuitive eating. It was something that I had heard about, but at the time, I was in the midst of a food addiction. I hadn't dealt with my emotional issues around food, and I was eating fast food and cheese and pasta and all of that kind of food that is designed to mess with my brain, designed to be addictive. I was eating that kind of food as my main source, like my main diet. So when I tried intuitive eating, it was this tricky thing where I felt kind of sad. So I felt like eating ice cream. So I thought, if I want to eat ice cream, I must want to eat ice cream, right? Like that must be what my body needs. That's not necessarily how it works. Now, in our society, we've been so saturated with like diet culture and, every magazine that you see, There's all of these different diets on there. There's all of these different, here's how you should look. Here's these exercises you should do, all of that kind of stuff. So now what we're starting to see in our society is this huge push against diet culture, which is amazing, but can start to get into some tricky areas. Because since there's this huge push against diet culture, and we're starting to see things like body positivity, fat acceptance, and hashtags like healthy at every size, it's great that we're starting to encourage people to be more confident in their bodies, regardless of what their bodies, look like. But to have that confidence, have that love for their body, all of that is amazing. Where it starts to get a little bit tricky is when we start to ignore the real issues that are happening in our society. If you look at some fat activists, there are some people out there who believe that you should be able to, indulge in ice cream and pizza and cake and all of that stuff every day because that's what you want. And the thing about that is that it doesn't teach us how to hear our bodies. All of those foods are designed to be addictive to us. Like Lay's are made in a lab to trick our brains into thinking that we've found this jackpot of food, when in reality, it's doing very little for our bodies. Like I was talking about earlier with finding an apple in nature, if we were to find something that was high in fat, high in sugar, that would have been an amazing find for our ancestors. It would have hit the jackpot button in our brain that would have said, you need to get this again. We would have had to expend effort trying to find it. We would have had to go out and hunt something or, walk miles to gather this fruit kind of thing. It would have been a really rare instance for our ancestors. So it was really, really beneficial to our society that we have this huge jackpot button in our brain. Nowadays, we can go on our phones, hit a couple buttons, and have that jackpot button in our brain hit again and again and again. And this is where it starts to get really tricky. I know for me, when I had tried intuitive eating without dealing with my emotional issues and my food addiction, it wasn't really teaching me how to listen to my body. So what I did was, when I would have a craving for something like French fries, I would really stop and listen to myself. And I would think, okay, why am I craving French fries right now? Is it because I need salt? Would I be happy with something like steamed broccoli with salt on it? If if I had wanted steamed broccoli with salt on it, then I knew, okay, I'm craving French fries because I need the salt, I need, any other nutrients that it's going to give me. If I thought, no, I'm not really going to want broccoli, I just want the French fries, then I had to evaluate, am I bored? Am I sad? Why am I craving this food? And it really helped me to stop and focus on why I was craving what I was craving. And another thing that's really important, not only listening to your body, to listen to your brain. Because as we start to get into thinking about what we're eating, thinking about our habits, sometimes our thoughts can really shift as well. And one thing that can be really tricky is when you start to have these obsessive thoughts in your brain. So, like I said, it's really important to evaluate where your food cravings are coming from. It's also really important to evaluate where your thoughts are coming from. If you look in the mirror and you see yourself and you have all these negative thoughts, it's really important to evaluate, okay, is this really me thinking these thoughts? Are these thoughts going to be beneficial for me? Are these thoughts going to help me live my best lifestyle and that kind of thing? So it's really important to listen to yourself, listen to what you're craving, listen to what you're thinking, and really evaluate whether those choices are going to help you live your best life. And not only that, it's also important to listen to yourself when you are craving things. For example, my husband and I, since we've been quarantined, we've mostly been cooking at home. And so we've been eating lots of fruits and vegetables and stuff like that. And every now and then you're like, you know what? I need a pizza tonight. And that is totally okay. Living a healthy lifestyle is really about eating foods that are going to be healthy for you and eating foods that are going to be healthy for your mental health as well. So it's really important to keep that balance. It takes time. It definitely isn't something that you can just flip a switch, understand all of that stuff, understand how to listen to yourself. It really takes time, but it's important to keep working on it. Another thing that I think is really important is to find resources. So I've put up on the screen some of my best tips for resources. If you go on YouTube, there are a million different YouTube pages out there that can help you get inspired. Some of my favorites are Pickup Lines, which does kind of holistic, healthy recipes, but also healthy habits kind of pages. The page What I've Learned does a lot of nutrition-based information, very scientific-based information. And then there are pages that just get me inspired to get in the kitchen and get cooking, like Joshua Weissman, who does a lot of recipe videos, Binging with Babish, who shows you how to make foods that you've seen in movies and on TV. And then the last YouTube one that I have on there, I've actually never said her name out loud, so I believe it's Kiana Doherty. Not sure, probably said it wrong. Um, but she posts a lot of videos about motivation, about why it's so hard to lose weight, why it's so hard to stay motivated to keep that healthy lifestyle going, and what you can do about it. Social media can be a really great resource. It can also be a really terrible resource. So social media is one of those that it's really important to be careful with. If you're on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, any of those, it's really important to constantly be evaluating whether or not the things you're looking at are adding value to your life. Another resource can just be somebody to talk to, a parent, a friend, a counselor, somebody who you can really talk to that will listen to you, somebody that you can help work through, whatever you're dealing with. Apps can be a great resource. An app that reminds you to drink water, or an app that gives you recipes, things like that. And getting out in the community. So definitely, joining classes, joining groups, finding support groups, anything that you need. It's really important to be evaluating where you are in your life, evaluating whether the things that you're putting in your life are adding value, and really reaching out when you need somebody to reach out to. So those are some of my best resources. And you guys, I just want to thank you guys so much for being here today. If you want to see more webinars, we're constantly updating our information. We're constantly getting better and better working on this platform. I know we had a few issues with the sound today, so that is something that we're definitely working on. But if you want to check out our other webinars, you can go to raylozano.com. We have webinars on marijuana and THC. We have webinars on opioids, screen addiction, vaping, and tobacco. So if you go to raylozano.com, then you click that programs button, online presentations, that will show you how to get these different webinars and how to register for them. So before we end this, I just want to know if there are any questions. So if you guys have any questions, please go ahead and type them in the chat. Okay, I just realized that the chat section, the chats go up, not down. I kept looking at the very first chats that came in. So I'll give you guys a minute. If any questions come in. Oh, thank you, Tracy. That's so sweet. Food industries like the tobacco companies, that's so true. It's so tricky in our society because all of these big businesses are really just out to make money. And so they really don't care about whether the products they're giving us are good for us or bad for us. They're really just out to make money. So that can be really, really tricky. Oh, good. Thank you guys for all the all the sweet things coming in. I'm so addicted to chips and popcorn. Yeah, I definitely feel that. Chips are one of those that once I eat one of them, I cannot stop eating chips. All right. Well, it doesn't look like they're. Oh, this is explained very much. Oh, good. It doesn't look like you guys have any questions. So I just want to thank you guys again so much for being here today. And if you do have any questions that you're like, oh, shoot, I should have asked that, please feel free to contact us at raylozano.com. You can get in contact with me directly or with, our administrative staff. So thank you guys so much, and I hope you all have a great day. Bye.